When humans join wars, we do not play nice. We kill, we strategize. We annihilate our enemies with ruthless precision, winning in hours what takes other species weeks. And the Vidians were about to discover this universal truth, the hard way. On Vidia Prime, civil war had ravaged the planet for centuries. Brother killing brother, fathers slaughtering sons, as the Vidian Empire clashed endlessly with rebel separatist forces in a grinding, bloody stalemate. Millions had perished, cities lay in ruins, but still neither side gained an inch. In the once grand capital of Hydrus, now pockmarked by artillery craters and reeking of death, the Vidian Emperor Drusus received dire news from his most trusted general. Grand Marshal Neman Volus entered the throne room and knelt on the cracked marble floor, choosing his next words carefully. The rebels had acquired powerful new energy shields, making their fortresses impervious to imperial bombardment. Their latest offensive to break the siege of Hydrus had been repelled with immense casualties. Emperor Drusus slammed an armor-plated fist onto the arm of his throne, the clang echoing through the hall. 7 generations his dynasty had ruled this planet, and he would not become the one to lose it all. Not after sacrificing so much. "Oh, you're telling me that with the mightiest fleet in the sector, we still cannot defeat a bunch of rebel scum?" Drusus seethed through clenched teeth. "I'm starting to question your competence, Volus. Give me solutions, not excuses for failure." The old general suppressed a shudder. He knew that the Emperor's patience was at its limit, and that more than one of his predecessors had been executed for less. "Your Excellency, we may have one option left, though I hesitate to suggest it," Volus said cautiously. "There are mercenaries we could hire, elite soldiers who could strike behind enemy lines. They call themselves humans." "Humans?" the Emperor scoffed in disgust. "Those upstart primates from the Orion Spur? I've heard the stories. Undisciplined, insubordinate, and they demand a king's ransom. You expect me to put the fate of my empire in the hands of those animals?" "I understand, Excellency," Volus replied, head bowed. "I only mention it because, well, the humans have a saying. When we join wars, we win in hours. If the rumors are true, they could bring a swift end to this war. But I will redouble our efforts as you command." The Emperor growled and waved a dismissive hand. "See that you do, General. I will not lose this throne, not to rebels and certainly not to humans. Now go, bring me victory or die trying. Vidia Invicta." As the general hurried from the throne room, his heart heavy, a treacherous thought wormed unbidden into his mind. What if the humans really could win this war in mere hours when he had failed for years? How much more blood would water the ground before the Emperor swallowed his pride? Volus shook his head. It was not his place to question. He had his orders, victory or death. But in the darkest corners of his mind, a seed of desperate hope took root. Maybe, just maybe, the humans were not the Emperor's last resort, but his only hope. On the front lines, the ground shook and heaved with each thundering artillery impact. Rebel Commander Hydra stood firm in the fortified command bunker, watching the barrage hammer their defenses on flickering screens, the sprawling network of trenches and gun emplacements, shielded by the thrumming energy barriers, weathered the storm. Hydrus tapped the comms. "Hold the line, separatists. The imps are throwing everything they've got at us, but our shields are holding. We can outlast them." A haggard lieutenant, uniform scorched and tattered, shook his head. "Sir, the men can't take much more of this. That shelling hasn't let up for 3 rotations. The Empire's hurling ordnance at us they can't afford to waste," Hydrus said. "They're getting desperate. Stay sharp and—" A scout burst into the bunker, eyes wild. "Commander, dire news from the front. The imps deployed a new shock battalion with some kind of experimental incendiary shell. They're punching right through our shields." Hydrus paled. He punched up a tactical holodisplay, showing Imperial forces surging against the separatist lines in a dozen sectors. Fiery fissures split the earth as the new shells impacted, burning through shield and stone like plasma through hull. "They've had those monsters in reserve all this time," Hydrus snarled. "Sneaky Imperial bastards, we can't hold against that firepower." He whirled to face his officers, jaw clenched. "Signal the evacuation. All units fall back to secondary positions. We can't lose the entire battalion. Klaxons blared as rebel soldiers scrambled to retreat. Artillery thundered in their wake, the incendiary shells igniting raging firestorms, melting fortifications into molten slag. Hydrus watched through macrobinoculars as the Imperial forces advanced, heavy walkers trampling the ruins of separatist defenses. "This isn't over," he growled to no one. "The rebellion will not fall. We'll find another way." His comlink chirped and Hydrus activated the encrypted channel. The face of a young Vidian woman flickered into view, her voice hushed. "Commander, I have information. I'm embedded in the Imperial command staff. I know this sounds insane, but we may need to hire human mercenaries. The cost would bankrupt us, but I fear we're out of options." Hydrus stared at the holo, incredulous. Hire humans? The separatist leadership would have his head for even suggesting it. Their entire war chest couldn't afford the Terrans' exorbitant fees. And yet, if these humans were half as fierce as the stories claimed, they might just be the rebellion's last hope. On Earth, Stephen Mitchell leaned back in his chair as a news anchor droned on about the latest in the long-running Vidian civil war. The grey-haired mercenary commander was only half listening, his mind preoccupied with finding the next contract for his elite Ares company, when one line snapped him to full alertness. "Unconfirmed reports suggest the rebels are now considering contracting human mercenaries to turn the tide against Imperial forces." Mitchell paused the broadcast and punched up his contacts on the holo screen. The Vidian job sounded damn lucrative, and Ares was between gigs. He needed to jump on this lead before the other PMCs caught wind. A few calls later, Mitchell had negotiated one hell of a deal. The desperate separatists were willing to pay top dollar for Ares' services. Always up for a challenge, Mitchell told them he'd be there in 2 standard galactic weeks. He pinged his top lieutenant on comms. "Brick, we just landed a big one. I need you to get the men and gear ready for transit. We're headed to the Vidian theater." "No rest for the wicked, eh?" Brick chuckled. "I'll get the Karen prepped. The boys could use some real action." 2 weeks later, Mitchell stood on the Charon's bridge as the customized cruiser dropped out of warp at the edge of the Vidia system. The ship was a beauty, compact but heavily armed and armored, able to punch well above her weight class. Ares engineers had made special modifications, packing enough firepower to threaten ships twice the Charon's size. "Detecting separatist corvette on approach, Commander," Ops reported. "Looks like our welcoming party." Mitchell nodded. "Bring us in nice and easy. Brick, you're with me. Let's go meet our new employer." The 2 mercs boarded the rebel ship, where they came face to face with a haggard Vidian officer. The alien eyed them warily. "Commander Hydrus," he introduced himself. "I'll be blunt, we're in dire straits. The Empire's beating us back on all fronts with their new incendiary shells. I pray you humans are as good as they say, because you're costing us a fortune we don't have." Mitchell met his gaze with a level stare. "I'm Stephen Mitchell, and this is Jake Masterson, my second. I'll be straight with you too, Hydrus. The Ares company will exceed your expectations. Your Imperial foes have never faced humans in battle. Each of my men is a top-tier Special Forces operator with cutting-edge gear." Brick stepped up and activated a holo-display of Ares' armor systems. "We're equipped with the latest self-sufficient combat exoskeletons, onboard AIs to assist targeting, IFF, tactical analysis, strength and speed augmentations for superhuman performance, regenerative shielding and multi-spectrum stealth, and a very, very lethal arsenal. We're built to handle anything." Hydrus looked over the specs, clearly impressed but still uncertain. "I don't doubt your technology, but even the best armor won't save you from a direct hit by those void-damned incendiary shells. They burn through shields and plate like nothing I've ever seen." A wolfish smile tugged at the corner of Mitchell's mouth. "Well then, I guess we'll just have to kill them all before they get a chance to fire those shells." His tone made it clear this was no idle boast, but a simple statement of fact. Hydrus could only watch in stunned disbelief as the human mercenaries went to work. The Ares company struck like lightning, appearing as if from thin air to hit the Empire's most vital bases and supply depots. Imperial sensors and scanners were all but useless, unable to get a lock on the humans' cloaked transports and power armor. The Imperial forces quickly descended into chaos, flailing blindly at an enemy they couldn't see or predict. Carefully hoarded munitions stockpiles vanished in the night, only smoldering craters left behind. Irreplaceable prototypes were destroyed on the assembly lines, sending weapons research back months or years. And when the Ares mercs did reveal themselves, it was far too late for the Empire to mount an effective defense. Hydrus watched helmet cam footage, jaw agape, as the humans tore through the Imperial lines like demons. Their strength-enhancing exoskeletons let them crush Vidian skulls with their bare hands, while their targeting AIs ensured every shot found its mark with ruthless precision. Imperial soldiers fired frantically at the armored figures, but the mercs' regenerating energy shields flickered and held firm. The humans were unstoppable, leaping over barricades and shrugging off all but the heaviest of weapons. In one clip, Hydrus saw an Imperial soldier put a flechette round clean through a merc's shoulder, only for the human to whirl around and paint the wall with the soldier's brains before the trooper's body even hit the ground. The most devastating blow came when Mitchell himself led an all-out assault on the Shock Battalion's central compound. The human commander fought like a man possessed, carving a bloody path to the armory as a one-man army. When the smoke cleared, Mitchell had stolen every prototype incendiary shell and rigged the production lines with enough ordnance to crater the entire facility. Without their technological trump card, the Imperial offensive crumbled like a house of cards. In just days, the Ares Company had shattered the stalemate that had choked Vidia Prime for years, driving the Empire to the very precipice of defeat. Separatist forces surged into the breach, reclaiming kilometers of lost ground by the hour. When word reached Emperor Drusus that his armies were in full retreat, the Vidian tyrant flew into an apocalyptic rage. He denounced the humans as vile abominations and placed a bounty on Mitchell's head large enough to buy a planet. Any Vidian loyal to the Empire was ordered to kill the mercenaries on sight. But Drusus knew it was far too late. The Ares had already tipped the scales too far. In one final act of genocidal spite, he commanded his orbital fleet to begin saturation bombardment of Vidia Prime's surface. If he could not rule the planet, he would slaughter every last living thing on it, rebel and civilian alike. As the first shells began to fall and entire continents burned, Hydrus and Mitchell shared a grim look of understanding. There was only one way to stop this madness at its source. The Ares Company would have to cut the head off the snake by capturing Drusus himself, or put the rabid dog down for good. The mercenaries geared up for what would be their greatest challenge yet, a desperate surgical strike on the heavily fortified Imperial Palace. As they boarded their transports, Hydrus grabbed Mitchell's armored gauntlet. "Bring that festering piece of filth back in chains," the rebel commander said, voice trembling with barely contained fury. "Or bring me his fucking head. For Vidia." Mitchell nodded grimly and slapped a mag of armor-piercing rounds into his rifle. "For Vidia," he agreed. Then the human was gone, vanished into the fray. The Imperial Palace was a Gothic monstrosity of jagged obsidian spires and labyrinthine corridors, every inch of it designed to repel armies. But no army had ever tried to assault it from within. The Ares Company tore into the defenders like attack dogs, ripping through layer after layer of the Emperor's fanatical bodyguards. The palace's once pristine halls were soon choked with twisted bodies and slick with Vidian blood. Drusus's elite Praetorian Guard, handpicked from the most brutal killers in the Empire, lasted scarcely longer than conscript cannon fodder against the humans' onslaught. After hours of relentless close-quarters slaughter, Mitchell and his surviving mercs finally battled their way to the throne room. The commander's armor was pitted and scorched, his rifle long since discarded, but the fire in his eyes still burned murderous bright. He kicked down the reinforced doors to find Emperor Drusus cowering behind his last line of defenders. The Praetorians rushed to engage, but they were already walking dead men. Armor joints whirring and servos straining, Mitchell became a whirlwind of carnage, pulping skulls and snapping spines until none were left standing. Gore-drenched and panting, the human leveled a salvaged plasma rifle at Drusus's head. The Emperor fell to his knees, begging for his life even as he spat curses at the human filth. With a shaking hand, he held out a data chip, the screen flashing with an astronomical figure. "Twice what the rebels promised you," Drusus stammered. "It's yours, just kill them and walk away." For a moment that seemed to stretch for an eternity, Mitchell stared at the chip, finger hovering over the trigger. Drusus began to smile, sure he had won. The damn monkey was as greedy as the rest of his kind. "So you know," Mitchell said conversationally, "I've dreamed about this moment." The human's finger tightened, the rifle whined as it hit full charge. But it was never about the money. The throne room vanished in a blinding flash of light and heat. When the glare faded, Emperor Drusus was sprawled on his back, a smoking hole between his eyes. Viscera dripped from the macabre stain painting the wall behind the throne. Mitchell lowered the rifle and spat a glob of bloody phlegm onto the dead tyrant's chest. "Consider that my resignation, asshole." Without a backward glance, the mercenary turned on his heel and strode from the throne room. It was time to get off this miserable rock before the rebels decided that Ares had outlived their usefulness. The mercs piled into their transports and lifted off, watching the Imperial Palace collapse into rubble as they broke orbit. The Ares company left Vidia as living legends, but they never stopped to bask in the glory. By the time the Separatists realized that the humans had slipped away without collecting their staggering fee, the Charon was already light years away. For his part, Mitchell never did tell a soul what really happened in that throne room. But for those who knew where to look, the signs were there. The data chip loaded with enough untraceable creds to buy a moon, hidden away in Mitchell's quarters. The Vidian imperial crowns he always seemed to have on hand even years later. And if you caught him in just the right mood, drunk enough to let the facade slip, you might hear him mutter. Drusus was a rabid dog that needed putting down, but even a broken clock is right twice a day. Some secrets, as they say, a man takes to his grave. In the days following Emperor Drusus' assassination, a power vacuum gripped the Vidian capital. Commander Hydrus and his separatist forces moved swiftly to fill the void, seizing control of the planetary government in a bloodless coup. Hydrus stood before the assembled masses, his voice amplified by hovering speaker drones. "My fellow Vidians, for too long we have suffered under the yoke of a corrupt and despotic regime. No longer. Today marks a new era of freedom and prosperity for all our people. As your new supreme leader, I vow to heal the wounds of war and forge a just, equitable society." The crowd erupted in raucous cheers, chanting Hydrus's name. In the back, Stephen Mitchell crossed his arms, face an impassive mask. Jake Brick Masterson glanced over, brow furrowed. "So, you buying this, boss?" Mitchell shook his head. "Not for a second. I know his type. Meet the new boss, same as the old boss." Masterson grunted. "Long as the cred's clear, not our problem. We did the job." "Yeah," Mitchell said, eyes hard. "I'm starting to think that was a mistake." The Ares mercenaries soon returned to Earth, their coffers overflowing with Vidian plunder. Mitchell kept a close eye on the news from the war-torn planet, a gnawing unease growing in his gut. At first, Hydrus made a show of reform, appointing a diverse reconciliation council and promising free elections. But behind closed doors, he ruthlessly consolidated power, purging rivals and stacking key posts with loyalists. Dissent was swiftly crushed under the treads of peacekeeping tanks. Mitchell watched with mounting disgust as Hydrus morphed into a tyrant, worse than Drusus ever was. Roving death squads brandishing the Ares' stolen incendiary shells sowed terror, massacring entire villages for seditious speech. Desperate refugees fled to the shattered wastes, only to be hunted for sport. When leaked video showed a unit of Hydrus' elite Basilisk Guard burning a crowded hospital to ash, Mitchell slammed his fist on the console, rattling the bulkheads. "Damn it, Brick, this is on us. We took out one monster and left that planet to another, and now that maniac is using our weapons." Masterson shrugged, but couldn't meet Mitchell's eyes. Natives were killing each other for centuries before we showed up. Way of the verse, fuck 'em. Mitchell rounded on his lieutenant, jabbing a finger in his chest. No, fuck that, we broke it, we bought it. I'm not leaving those people to that rabid dog. He activated the ship-wide comms. Ares, gear up and prep for transit. We're going back to Vidia, time to finish the job. The Charon dropped out of warp on the far side of Vidia Prime's moon, a steel knife poised to strike. In the ship's armory, the mercs buzzed with nervous energy as they checked weapons and sealed their armor. They'd all seen the footage. They knew this would be their toughest fight yet. Mitchell and Masterson stood shoulder to shoulder, running final systems checks. The commander slotted an extended magazine of AP rounds into his rifle. Brick, I need you on hacking and overwatch. When we hit dirt, slice into the defense grid and keep the skies clear. Masterson nodded. Roger that, I'll be a ghost in the machine. The Ares transport screamed through the atmosphere, the pilots juking wildly to evade the flak cannons. Mitchell gripped his restraints as the ship bucked. Incoming fire spanged off the hull, each impact a hammer blow. Brick's voice crackled over comms. 30 seconds. Hydrus has the basilisks dug into the capital, using civilians as human shields. Watch your targets and check your corners. Let's do this quick and clean, people. The transports flared, washing landing pads with jet wash. Ramps slammed down and the Ares stormed out, weapons up. Stunned Vidian guards barely had time to raise their rifles before the mercs cut them down in flashes of blood and fire. Mitchell charged up the steps of the Separatist command bunker, Masterson on his heels. The lieutenant worked his techno-sorcery on the blast doors, and they ripped open with a tortured shriek of metal. No sooner had they crossed the threshold than a hail of incendiary shells engulfed them. Mitchell felt the hits slam into his armor like freight trains, shields screaming as they strained to dissipate the thermal bloom. Basilisk guards boiled out of cover on all sides, the crack of their rifles deafening in the confined space. "Shit, it's a kill box," Masterson yelled, diving behind a sparking console. A stray round clipped his shoulder in a spray of Ceramo composite and blood. "Boss, we gotta get the hell out of—" His words dissolved into an agonized scream as an incendiary shell punctured his suit and ignited. Fire roared over Masterson's arm and chest, slagging armor to melt and char. The stench of cooking meat choked the air. "Brick!" Mitchell blitzed to his lieutenant's side and dragged him back into the corridor, heedless of the rounds pinging off his armor. "Ares, fall back! Get the wounded out! Now!" As the mercs hauled Masterson to the waiting transports, Mitchell glimpsed a flicker of movement in the smoke, Hydrus slipping away down a maintenance shaft. Teeth bared in a feral snarl, Mitchell keyed his comms. "Tango Primary is rabbiting. I'm in pursuit. Rest of you, get Brick stable and evac the AO. I'll handle Hydrus." Ignoring the shouts of protest, Mitchell plunged into the shaft, clambering up access ladders and gantries. The tunnel opened onto a vast, domed chamber, a hydroponic oxygen farm, its tiered platforms lush with alien flora. Shafts of pale sunlight lanced down through the armor-glass roof. Rifle raised, Mitchell advanced into the eerie quiet, senses straining. Condensation dripped from broad lilac leaves, every plink and gurgle setting his nerves on fire. A flicker in the periphery, a skirl of disturbed foliage, and he whirled, finger on the trigger. "You just don't know when to quit, do you?" Hydra's mocking voice echoed from the greenery. "Can't you see this is for the greater good? The Vidian people need order, need a firm hand to guide them." "So I'm not interested in your self-serving bullshit," Mitchell growled. He slunk through the dangling vines, scything the muzzle of his rifle in tight arcs. "Always the soldier, aren't you? The good little dog killing on command." Hydra's voice dripped false sympathy. "It's not too late, Mitchell. I'm a generous man. Join me, and I'll pay you triple what Drusus offered. Think of what you could do with that kind of money." Mitchell barked a harsh laugh. "You sad sack of shit. You really think I care about the money after seeing the hell you unleashed with the weapons I gave you?" He blinked the stinging sweat from his eyes. a cold rage rising in his gut. "I'm putting you down, Hydrus, like the rabid dog you are." A rustle of leaves to his left, and Mitchell dove to the side on pure instinct. An incendiary shell seared past his helmet, near enough to scorch the paint. He hit the ground rolling and came up firing, stitching a line of AP rounds through the ferns. Hydrus screeched in pained fury and burst from the foliage, his face a mask of blood and madness. He raked the human with shells, slamming Mitchell back on his heels. The merc's armor held barely, the ceramic crunching and buckling under the onslaught. Mitchell charged forward, closing the gap in a blur of speed even as rounds hammered his armor. Hydrus screamed in rage and frustration as his gun ran dry. With a snarl, he drew a wicked vibro knife from his belt and lunged at Mitchell, aiming for the neck seal. The blade skated across Mitchell's helmet, gouging a deep furrow in the composite. Grunting, Mitchell trapped Hydrus's knife arm in an iron grip and wrenched savagely. The Vidian howled as his wrist bones shattered with a wet crunch. Vibro knife clattering to the floor, Hydrus reared back for a desperate headbutt. Mitchell slammed his helmet forward to meet it in a vicious crack of chitin on ceramic. The Supreme Leader reeled back, spitting teeth and blood. Mitchell kicked Hydrus' legs out from under him and drove him to the floor, armored knee on his chest. He pressed the barrel of his rifle under the Vidian's chin, finger tightening on the trigger. The mad dictator spat a mouthful of bloody drool. "Do it then, human, martyr me. The people will rise up in my name and drown your precious Ares in their blood." Mitchell froze, Hydrus's words worming into his brain. How many more would he have to gun down to keep the peace? 12? 100? Forever? Disgusted, he hauled himself to his feet and decoupled the rifle's magazine. It clattered to the floor as he turned and limped away. "What are you doing?" Hydrus blubbered, struggling to rise on his shattered wrist. "Finish it!" "No," Mitchell rasped, not breaking stride. "I'm not going to martyr you. The Vidian people deserve justice, not more bloodshed. They can decide your fate." He keyed his comms. "Ares, Hydrus is neutralized. Broadcast our helmet cam footage on all frequencies. Let the people see their savior for what he really is, and send his location to what's left of the resistance. I'm sure they'll want a word." Ignoring Hydrus's enraged shrieks, Mitchell limped to the edge of the dome. In the streets below, the Ares were already coordinating relief efforts, triaging the wounded and clearing the rubble. Mitchell cracked his helmet, wincing as the cool air stung his lacerated face. He watched Vidia Prime's twin suns rise through the spider-webbed dome, painting the sky in hues of blood and fire. He felt no elation, no satisfaction, just a bone-deep weariness. The Ares had bled and suffered to give this planet a second chance at freedom, and nearly destroyed it in the process. Was it enough? Would the cycle start anew the moment they left? He had no answers, only the hollow certainty that he'd bought the Vidians a little more time. Time to rebuild, time to heal, before the next tyrant rose from the ashes. Keying his comms, he raised Masterson on a private channel. "Brick, give me some good news. Tell me you're still with us." A pained groan rattled across the link. "Still kicking, boss. Gonna have some gnarly new scars to show the ladies." Mitchell huffed a relieved chuckle. "Knew you were too mean to die. Soon as the docks clear, you get the Ares ready to dust off. It's time we got paid and got the hell off this rock." "Roger that. One last thing, boss." Masterson's voice was raw, almost hesitant. Did we do good here? Did we make a difference?" Mitchell glanced back at the smoke-shrouded city, the glint of the rising sun on his gouged and pitted armor. "Honestly, Brick, I don't have a fucking clue, but we did the best we could. That'll have to be enough." If you finish this story, please subscribe and like the video. Then leave a comment that says, "I liked the story," and I will heart every single one of them. It really helps me. Thank you for your time.